when it comes to finding a relationship between two categorical variables, an easy way to visualize the data is to tabulate it. This is called a contingency table. A contingency table is simply a table of counts. If we have two binary variables, we call this a 2x2 table. Binary variable here, binary variable here. Is there a relationship between liking stats and whether you are male or female? Or another way to state that is, are these things dependent on each other? Hey, that person over there, do they like stats? If the answer depends on whether that person over there is male or female, then we say, yeah, there's a relationship. Another way you can think about is, what percent of men like stats? Well, 11 over 100 is like 11%. What percent of women? It's like 10%. Are those two proportions equal? This is known as the homogeneity of proportions. Are they equal to each other or not? So this is how we look at our data. The chi-square test is going to be based on these tables. The simplest one is 2x2. And inside each table is not a mean or any other statistic, but inside each table is just a little count like this. I have 10, whatever. How many people are in each table? It might be in each cell. It might be 10. It might be 15. I just got a little distracted. One year when I taught this course, there was a student in the front row named Sarah. And during the class, Sarah would like track and do these little hatch marks throughout the course of the class. And I never figured out what she was. I think if I was saying or something like that, I should email her and ask that. All right. So anyway, in each cell is a count. Now, these cells must be exclusive and exhaustive. So liking stats, you have to be in one or the other. You can't be in both. And for the research question that you have, you cannot be like an other. There's no other like third choice. Now, for these tests, also, we're going to see this independent assumption that when you grab someone to be in the study, you don't pull somebody else who's in it. And now we have to be careful. Like everything we've done, we have to be very careful about this cause and effect. You know the general phrase, correlation is not causation. And now for you, correlation means a specific thing, right? It's the linear relationship between two continuous variables. But correlation in the general sense is for association or contingency or relationship. And when people say correlation is not causation, that still applies here too. Be careful about implying cause and effect. Now, we can think about the chi-square in two ways. And it kind of depends on the sampling design of your study. And there's a great reading on this in Jerry DeLaw's Little Handbook of Statistical Practice. One way to think about the contingency tables is if I just get a bunch of random people, let's say I go out and I randomly sample, say, 200 people. Some of them are going to be men. Some of them are going to be women. Some of them are going to like stats and some are not. And if the probability or the chance of liking stats is kind of depends on whether that random person is a man or a woman, that's one way that we can sort of frame this question. The other way, and we're going to see the mechanics and interpretation, everything of the test is the same. But the other way is this idea of two proportions. And it comes from the design of the study. I go out and I get 100 men and I say, what percent of them like stats? And then I go out and I get 100 women and say, what percent of them like stats? And then I ask the question, are these two things equal to each other? Homogeneity of proportions. And what we're going to do, like we've done with all statistical tests, is think about what would I expect to see if there was nothing going on? If men and women were actually the same, men and women in the population, if they were the same when it came to stats likingness, and I had 100 men and 100 women, what would I expect to see? Well, it would sort of depend on what's the idea of the base rate or what's the baseline. In general, people don't like stats. What's your best estimate of how much people like stats? Well, it's something 100, maybe like 10.5%, right? That's my best estimate. So what would I expect to see if the null hypothesis were true, if men and women were the same? I would expect to see 10.5 men here and 10.5 women here. Now, obviously, you can't have half of a person in a study, but that's what I would expect to see if this is what it is. What did I actually get? Well, I actually, what did I observe? I actually observed pretty much 10.5. In fact, I observed as close to 10.5 as I can actually observe based on the fact that only full people can answer a survey and be in a study. So we're going to see that what we're going to do is compare what did I observe relative to what did I expect. And that's funny because this goes back to what is our definition of a p-value? The probability of observing a test statistic of a given magnitude or larger if the null hypothesis is true. It's the idea of how weird are my data if I assume that they come from some null hypothesis. Now, as you might guess, we say the probability of observing a test statistic. Guess what statistic we use here? Chi-square. Chi-square is a statistic. It is a one-number summary of your data. And we'll see how to calculate this in the next set of slides. But ask yourself this. If the null hypothesis is there's no relationship between the two variables, then the alternative is just, hey, not the null, right? And so if we think about this, the proportions are equal, homogeneity of proportions, then the null hypothesis is, hey, they're not equal. Or if we think about the idea, grabbing someone, what's the chance that they like stats or not? Does it depend on what type of person I grab, right? The null hypothesis is that there's dependence. So now we need just to think for a second. What we're going to do is we're going to go cell by cell. And we're going to say, what would we expect to see if the null hypothesis were true? And then we will calculate what we actually got and see how much of a signal or a difference or weirdness we got. So just think for a second here. What would you expect to see if men and women were the same? What would you expect to see for A and B? Well, you would expect to see this and this. And what we'll do is we'll go out and collect some data, and then what did we observe? And we will compare the observed to the expected. And that's how you calculate the chi-square statistic. And we'll do the details in the next set of slides.